Welcome, everyone. This is Vinod Lobo, founder and CEO of Learning Upgrade. If you see a survey, please help us by filling it out. And we're going to get started shortly. We're just letting some more people come in, and then we're going to get started. Thank you for joining. Okay, I think we're going to get started now. We have over 100 attendees. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Vinod Lobo. I'm the founder and CEO of Learning Upgrade. And our goal today is to explore together how we can help students who have fallen behind due to school closures and struggles with remote learning. And we don't just want to bring students back to where they were before COVID. We want to help students accelerate all the way to full proficiency, because this is a golden opportunity to try some new approaches, share experiences, and do things in a new way. So we have two panels, which you can see on your screen. The first will be educators. These are people on the front lines who have some innovative ideas to share with you about reversing the slide. And the second panel features people bringing new resources to the table, unique approaches that you can start using right away to solve the problem. In between, we have a really special treat for you. Monica Groves from the X Prize Foundation. Many of you know her from the Adult Literacy X Prize. She'll be our keynote speaker between the two panels. So I want to get started by introducing Drew Robinson from Learning Upgrade, and he's going to give you an overview of the issue of reversing the slide.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So I just want to give a brief overview. When we talk about the COVID slide, what do we mean? So I think everybody's familiar with the concept of the summer slide, where we had students with us in the spring, then they would leave for 3 months. And when they came back in the fall, they didn't just start exactly where they left off. There was a little bit of a loss in their math and their literacy skills. So, they really took that for research and they wanted to see how that would impact students post-COVID. And what the studies have been finding is that the students are losing, their proficiency in ELA. It's a little more extreme in math, but that was just in a short-term study. Now that we're looking over a full year, things are starting to get a little bit more severe. So, let's take a look at this model that we've developed here at Learning Upgrade. So we take a look at what students, their projected grade level pre-COVID tends to be linear. We see them starting out in January of 2020, which is last year. And then what we saw is that in March, the end of March of 2020, school shut down. This was national. And so this is really when this COVID slide began. We had some students having a difficult time adjusting to remote learning. We had others stop showing up to remote learning entirely. And now that we're back to a blended in some states, in class in others, and then many states still where there's no school at all, we're seeing the severity of this slide start to steepen. And it depends, different students are having different levels, but what we're really finding we need to do is identify this learning loss. So we need a rigorous assessment tool so that each individual student can be identified, we can see their learning loss, and then we can look at the future. So, one thing that's certain is that if we just continue what we did in the past, which is wishful thinking in most cases, that this is our without intervention curve. No matter what, we're going to be behind. So we can see that COVID learning loss over time. It's going to be 1 year, one grade level. So what we really need to do is have accelerated intervention. We need a remediation tool that can take students to make up for that lost time. So this is the idea behind the COVID slide, and you're going to be hearing from innovative educators and others in the field that can give you some ideas on how we reach that goal of stopping COVID learning loss, and we'll be hearing from them now.
Thank you, Drew. So our very first panel is a group of educators, Michael Matos, Curtis Ward, and Kurt Hewlett. And each one of them is going to be presenting for a few minutes, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So I want all of you to think about some questions to share so that this becomes an interactive session. So there's a Q&A button in Zoom. You can click on it, type your questions in. Drew's going to feed them to me, and we're going to ask them of our panel. Our first panelist today, Michael Matos, is the Technology Project Manager at Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition and also the Illinois Digital Learning Lab. So Michael, you can share your screen and open up your video and we can hear from you.
Great. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about onboarding. So app onboarding, very important step to get students to that level of being able to use these apps outside of the classroom. So we've looked at, the importance that individualized learning is become. So personalization and acceleration are priorities now. And as schools battle learning and opportunity gaps that exist before the pandemic and those exacerbated by it, technology is well suited for supporting personalized learning. The mobile devices are a good fit to help with equity, staff, learners, and families as a whole. So what I want to look at is a lot of the information that I've gathered from working with the XPRIZE apps all the way to what's happening now after the switch to almost virtual or a blended learning approach, and then looking at a lot of the instructors and what they used, what obstacles they faced during the years of the Illinois Digital Learning Lab project. So we're going to keep going here, and please think about what type of questions you'd like to ask. So the onboarding plan, so the first experience with your app. So before designing the onboarding process, it was important to think about the user's experience in their first navigation through the app. What do you expect from the users? What do you need to show to explain the added value of your app at the moment they download it? So make sure that all of that is clear. If you succeed in making this experience positive, the user will return and thus improve the retention rate of your app. And that information, some of it comes from the tool.io back in 2017, the best practices that they had put together for app onboarding, if you want to take a look at that. So think onboarding parties, in person, virtual, a combo. One other fact that I'd like to let you know about is according to andrewchen.com, which is also some interesting information on apps as well. On average, apps lose 77% of their active users in the first 3 days after they install. So, that results, obviously, if you paid for it, some money losses and then maybe wasted work on levels and so on. So therefore, onboarding is essential to deliver the message about the value that the user should expect to receive from an app and to generate the need to reuse it. So a very important part of this. As we look at just some very basic ideas of mobile devices. So 78% of American adults are smartphone owners, right? And that's back from 2018, which is probably increased. Americans check their phone an average of 12 minutes, every 12 minutes, burying their heads 80 times a day. That comes from the Pew Research. An average person struggles to get a little more than 10 minutes without checking their phone. Learner access to home computers is limited. And this is a study that we did from a lot of our Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition members. And 25% of the learners reported access to computers at home, while 88% of the learners reported access to a mobile phone. So something to really think about as you're putting together your curriculum. While computer skills are lacking, learners do a plethora of things on their mobile devices. So, and then we also know that adult learners spend a lot of time waiting. Offices, and at home, or whatever the case may be, they have the time to look into these apps. As we look at onboarding characteristics pre-COVID, the face-to-face examples, so using the apps in the classroom, learning groups, the app to speed idea, great idea, with an option to use independently, that was being used quite a bit. App use and onboarding were developed as supplements to the classroom learning. App support and introduction was mainly face-to-face with instructor and learner group support, and then online support was secondary. Okay, and this is something that we had to shift quite a bit. Collecting information about the make and model of learner phones helped, to have learners who use the same model to help each others, and then also to consist of what the characteristics of these learning groups would be. Onboarding parties were face-to-face, and learners and instructors learned in class how to download the app and start working on their first assignments and discuss expectations and even reviews, and possible assessments if they wanted to take an assessment before going into a unit like you can in Learning Upgrade. And those expectations were started in class. What we found later, as we had to switch, pretty quick into this virtual learning. So the virtual examples dominate learning resources, resource introductions, replacing the onboarding that occurred that were mainly conducted through in-person groups or individually by video or online or a combination of all. Many times these focus exclusively bringing already enrolled learners up to speed on technologies that were new to them. This changed. This is what was happening pre-COVID, post-COVID. We were getting brand new learners that we had not been able to see in person, yet we had to onboard them to these apps virtually. Virtual onboarding meetings took the shape of a Zoom meeting, a WhatsApp, a Skype, a Facebook, Microsoft Teams, and quite a few others, where we introduced the app and the independence of use. We made sure that that was clear. We kind of had teachers go back, develop some more professional development, work together as groups, bring up those problem points that they would go back and discuss and try to work through the obstacles together in groups. Having teachers that can really take the reins on certain products, certain apps, and become the digital navigators, the go-to persons for those particular apps. We helped the download the app, either Android or iOS. We once again made sure with the survey what phone they were using. Together worked through a first lesson on the app. We set goals for use and engagement. We determined individual use obstacles as we work through that, and then obviously followed up with the instructor and maybe a designated digital navigator for that app if it was Learning Upgrade. We would have someone who is an expert that if the instructor needed that extra help with the onboarding virtually. The use of learning management systems of the app to virtually access participant progress became a forefront and a much more important feature in a lot of these apps as we work to getting the onboarding almost completely virtual and in a post-COVID situation. Many of our instructors also developed an onboarding, made the onboarding easier by developing a set of username and passwords where, for example, my username might be my first name and my last initial, or my last name initial, and then, or Michael 1, and then that way the password system for student name and a number can be what's developed, so they would have an easier time of getting back on their app and working through that. Many organizations also set up a system where there is a location, a virtual location where they can find the links to take them to the assignments that therefore they can complete on their apps, something like a Google Classroom. As we look through those options, We also found a number of, we also found a number of already made videos, YouTube videos that can help with this. However, many of our instructors created through Loom their own step-by-step instructions on how to download an app, for example, Learning Upgrade, and working through those assignments, taking an assessment if they needed to, unlocking all of the assignments or an assignments within a particular level of a subject so they can work at the pace they want and in the direction and order that they wanted. One example that I can give you of an already made video that was very helpful was one from the Literacy Council of Northern Virginia, and I believe the gentleman's name is Xavier Munoz. Very nice video. It's called Register for Learning Upgrade. Very similar ones were developed by some of the organizations that I worked with and some of the instructors. And it was really a learning process, and we worked together with professional development and in groups.
Michael? Hi, Michael. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
So no, we are all set, and thank you. And we'll get some more questions to you in the Q&A. And I want to bring in Curtis Ward next. So Curtis is the lead instructor and data coordinator of Adult Ed at Southern Crescent Technical College in Georgia. So Curtis, you are on. And while Curtis is coming on, remember you can click your Q&A and put questions in. And based on Michael's chat, I think there's a lot of questions coming in already. Thanks much, Michael. Curtis?
I'm ready now. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. I think you can all see my screen here now. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing here at Southern Crescent Technical College. Welcome to my classroom, by the way. This is my classroom here at the college. In the state of Georgia, the adult education departments are attached to the community colleges or the technical colleges. And so we do have some resources on hand that a lot of other programs don't have around the country, and I am fully aware of that. But we also have to scramble a little bit and get things together the best way that we can. And so I'm going to go over just a few things that we're doing here in our program to, as Drew put it, accelerate intervention. I like that term, so I'm stealing that one from Drew. So I just wanted to show you a few things. The first thing is some of the things we're doing to reach the adult ed learners that we have. Email addresses and phone numbers. We are constantly gathering those, constantly making sure they're up to date. And with our population of students, email addresses especially, but also phone numbers change all the time. They get new phone numbers, new emails every other day, it seems. And so keeping track of those and making sure students remain in contact with us is really, really important. And that's helped us quite a bit. The other thing that's helped us quite a bit in terms of the shutdowns that we've experienced, we are open right now, but we were closed 2 weeks ago because of COVID outbreaks and things. So that happens pretty frequently. But our online programs that we use, like Learning Upgrade, stay up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so students can use those online programs, not just to practice and to work on the skills that they need to work on, but also to earn attendance hours in our programs. We're able to count their activity on those different apps and different online programs as activity as it would be in the classroom. So those have been invaluable to us to use as a supplement to what we do in the classroom, but also just for some of our students, that's really the only way they can access things and be a part of adult education. The other thing that we've done at Southern Crescent is we've started a new online learning system. We're using Blackboard, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with who have either been to college recently or are in the college system yourself. But in the state of Georgia, we're able to use Blackboard for adult education. We've never been able to do that before. We just started it last year in the midst of COVID. But we've been able to build classes in Blackboard with assignments in them, as well as links to our online programs like Learning Upgrade and the others. And so our learners can attend a virtual class. They can review assignments based on their CCR standards for that class. And they can also link directly to the online resources that are tied to that class as well. Our classes are divided up based on the subject and the level of the TABE post-test that our students are about to take. So students are assigned to different classes based on their last test, and they get specific instruction based on that. When they're in class in person, it's sort of a one-room schoolhouse. That's the term we use. And when they're online, we just decided, well, if everybody's online, let's shuffle things around a bit and get students with teachers who specialize in what they really need. And so far, that's worked out really well. Our students are enjoying it and getting a lot from it. And in terms of accelerating that intervention that we want to do to make up for that, really that lost year that we had, this is really taking off and helping those students quite a bit. The other thing, and Michael mentioned this too, instructional videos. We learned real quick that emailing someone a list of instructions that has 20 steps is a great way for them not to do what you just emailed them. And so instead, what we've done is we have, screen captured our computers, talked through our instructions, clipped videos together so that our students have something to watch and mimic as they go through the login process. They go through the different links that are sent. It really does help a lot. There are pre-made videos out there. We found that just because we want to get real specific with our students, we like to make them ourselves, but it would be totally up to you how you wanted to handle that too. But instructional videos, we find go a lot farther than step-by-step instructions that are sent out the way that we used to do it. Another thing that we do, we like to have the virtual class sessions, and we do those through Blackboard now. We were doing them through WebEx. We've done them through several platforms over the last year, but mostly we're just excited to be able to communicate with our students again. We had a lot of trouble over last summer, especially just getting in touch with our students, having them interact with us again. We found that it's sort of difficult to do an online class. You don't get a lot of response sometimes, but different teachers have come up with strategies and ways to engage their students. And I find the more engaged I am in a lesson, the more engaged my students will be. If I'm interested, if I'm excited about it, if I really focus on what our lesson is all about, my students will start to do the same, and they'll jump in, they'll ask lots of questions, they'll respond to mine. And we really do have a good time. Sometimes we have to watch out for cameras and things we might see, but other than that, we like to interact with our students that way. We also have started doing virtual office hours. So our system allows us to have an open session, and if students need to talk with us, contact us, even do virtual testing, we're able to do that in those office hour times, and that really does help our students too. It gives us a time outside of class where we could talk to an individual student or maybe help someone with a specific question that they had. And the last thing I want to mention is what we're doing to sort of launch things beyond COVID-19. Our program for online classes that incorporates everything we already did plus more, it's something we've been wanting to do for a long time, and we've wondered how we might do it and thought about different ways. And it just so happened when the COVID outbreak happened and the shutdown happened, that gave us the final push to just say, okay, now let's make it happen. And so one of the things we've been trying to do is come up with new ideas or old ideas that we never got around to that in our circumstances today would make a big difference. And now that we have that push, we can really take off on those ideas that before were just ideas and now are really necessities. So creativity is important. Exploring ideas that you may have thought were silly 2 years ago suddenly are game changers today. So we're really excited about what we're doing at Southern Crescent, and we like to share that if at all possible. So thank you to Learning Upgrade and the folks over at Pro Literacy for hosting us today.
Thanks much, Curtis. Appreciate it. And our final panelist on this first panel is Dr. Kurt Hewlett. He is a special education advocate and educational consultant based in Central Texas. Kurt, you can share your screen and come on. Thanks much for all the good questions coming in, Q&A and chat, and keep those coming.
Okay, can everybody see my slide? Can you see it okay, Vinod?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Just so you know, as Vinod mentioned, I'm a special ed advocate, longtime educator, spent over 10 years as a principal, a number of years as a teacher, assistant principal. And now I work for a company called Let's Go Learn, and I work with school districts around the country, working with them on essentially individualizing and personalizing instruction. So this topic is extremely timely and extremely important to me. And I want to share a little bit about what I see and what I'm experiencing as I go into the schools. So, you know, there's no question that it's time for change. It's been time for change for a long time in education. And I think the pandemic, if there is a silver lining, it's that it is projecting us forward and hopefully moving the dial towards more hybrid models and leveraging technology to truly individualize and personalize instruction. You know, the other piece we've got to look at is we have an entire generation of kids who are of color, who are at risk, who are living in poverty, who are 1 to 2 to 3 grade levels below before a pandemic came into question. So what we now have are compounding effects of a worldwide pandemic. So these kids are now going to fall even further behind. And now we have this enormous issue of equity, which has always been an issue, but it's a more prominent issue today because these at-risk learners, these children of color, it's going to be even harder for them to catch up to their own age peers. And what we know is the current model of education wasn't serving them the best, and they weren't getting up to speed when they needed. So we've got to make an adjustment in order to ensure that they actually progress. So, you know, how are we responding? I would, you know, use the term mixed reviews. I've seen some good things and I've seen, frankly, some bad things. You know, and I mentioned that Google Meet does not equate to equity of instruction. A lot of teachers, and God bless them, we put them in an impossible situation. But, you know, having a kid check in now and again on Google Meet or once a day, whatever it may be, is not instruction. It's not equitable. My kids have personally been both virtual and in school, and there's no comparison to the quality of instruction they get to when they're in school. And the main reason is because we haven't supported our educators and given them the tools to be successful. It's hard to expect educators to turn on a dime when we don't give them the necessary tools to be successful. So, you know, where do we need to move? Where do we go now that we kind of know what's going on? And I like to use the term individualization. The ed tech industry uses the term personalization, but individualization started well before we ever got to personalization, starting in the early 90s. So the slide is real. Kids are falling behind. And so that question is, what do we need right now? And some of you may scoff, but my belief is that we need a conceptual framework similar to special education. And you may be thinking, why would we ever apply an approach that we deal with children who have disabilities to the masses? Well, the reason is because we've been doing individualization in special education since 1975. And the idea was that these kids were so far behind, in order to catch them up, we had to individualize their instruction. So what does that look like? And tell me if you can think of some products or approaches that might mimic this. In special education, we evaluate, we diagnose, we create individualized instructional programs matched to student deficits. We intervene when and where necessary. We formally assess progress on a regular basis. We meet with parents annually to discuss the program, and then we adjust programs based on data. So that is the personalized model. However, we're not applying it broadly enough. All children now truly need an individualized and personalized approach to education. And we're failing children if we don't start making these adjustments. So how do we go about it? I'm a firm believer that we have to leverage technology. We have the technology out there to diagnose where the kids are. We can evaluate them. We can prescribe instruction based on deficits. We can progress monitor those children, and then we can do the whole process over and over again and engage parents in the process. The other piece is that, hybrid models, in my strong opinion, are going to dominate the future. I don't think we'll ever go back to full just in class with no option for online support and learning, because there are kids who are actually flourishing in this environment in the home setting. Although I think it's a much smaller number of kids who are. So on that note, I will turn it back over to Vinod.
Thank you very much, Kurt. And we're going to bring our three panelists back. If you can turn your video on. And we've gotten some great questions from our audience. So let's see, Kurt, if you can stop sharing, and then.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm having a hard time. Sorry.
No problem. And then if we can just turn our video on, we are all set. Okay. So, one of the interesting questions that came through is there a personal success story of one of your students during COVID, for reversing the slide that stands out? Michael, I thought you could address that. You have a lot of students coming in to your literacy centers. Do you have any personal story to share?
Well, especially for use of the apps outside of normal classroom office hours, and having that access when you had to work a 12-hour day and you want to wind down with maybe learning a few things, having access to that app and being able to know how to use it and sign on has been very successful for many of our students. It seems to be a lifeline right now to keep them learning, and especially at their own pace. Just, one of the biggest things about technology, and especially for mobile use, is building that independence. Yeah. Where you could continue this learning. So that's definitely some of the examples that I have of success with this.
Yeah, exactly. One of our questions was, how do we continue learning for English learners during this difficult time? I think, Curtis, that you have a number of them at your college, and you're doing some innovative things.
Sure. We do have an English as a second language program at Southern Crescent, as well as the GED prep classes. And we have found Learning Upgrade to be especially good for them, because Learning Upgrade is one of the few online resources that is available out there that has lower level reading skills. Things like the alphabet and pronunciation and sight words and things like that. Those are sometimes very hard to find in textbooks, much less on the online side of things. And so that's been a great resource for us. And again, we do still have to reach out to those students. It's not as easy. And especially when the COVID shutdown happened right at the very beginning, a lot of our international students, which is the majority of our ESL students, were having a hard time knowing whether or not they were going to be able to stay in the country, or if they could travel back home, or what their life would be like for the next, in this case, a year. And so once that settled down, our ESL population kind of built back up, but it did take quite some time. But I think things like Learning Upgrade that made it easier to be at home and still learn helped a lot. ESL is a very interactive class, and very much a class where it pays to be in front of someone, seeing them speak, hearing them speak. And so ESL needed that ease of use that Learning Upgrade offers, where you only have maybe 3 or 4 buttons on the screen at a time. And also the audio that goes with it. We found that was an easier way for them to learn than trying to use the more complex online programs that we had to offer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one of the questions that came in was, um, how do you give impulse and motivation to students to keep using an app and screen helps continue learning even the down and quiet time? I know, Kurt, you've worked with a lot of special ed and a lot of schools in Texas on this issue. So how do you keep people going?
And are we referencing the students or
Yeah,
the teachers?
the students and the next
Both of
question.
them?
Well, the next question after that is related because so many teachers are getting burned out. So I think there's a combination
Yeah,
of student motivation and teacher
I
motivation.
think I think for the kiddos, a big part of it, especially if they're in a virtual environment, is changing it up and being creative with your planning. It's sort of like webinars. If you sit on a webinar or sit online for 6 hours on end without change, you're going to get tired of that too. And with kids, they have pretty short attention spans. So interactive activities that engage them are wonderful. Activities that have badges, I found that kids love the badges. They'd love to level up. The gamification is a big piece of it. I think interspersing the online activities with actual direct contact with a teacher is critical. The better schools I'm seeing are really doing that. They get the kids online and engaging with them as much as humanly possible. They also do student groups, having small student groups virtually to meet and discuss topics with themselves, and they're getting them engaged in that regular classroom environment. As far as the adults, I've worked with a few districts that are doing really nice work on a very basic level. I talked to one the other day that's asking them to basically do double duty, where they teach not only during the day, but then they're doing even more digital in the evening to try and catch some kids up. And so they're paying them stipends for that. And the stipends are never enough to truly compensate a teacher for their value, but it does say we value you and we're going to do that. I think checking in with teachers on a regular basis is absolutely huge. And we really could have a major teacher shortage coming extremely soon because of the fallout of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Curtis, one of the things that we're going to face in 2021 is that we're going to do this transition from remote learning to summer, where God knows if anything is going on, and then suddenly to in person in the fall. It's kind of a bumpy road. How do you keep your students learning continuously? Because I think if you look at Drew's steep angle of what we need to achieve in 2021 to get people back on track and reverse this COVID loss, there's no time to waste. And you can't waste the summer, you can't waste remote, you can't waste in person.
Well, I think that's a great question. I think there are some, I hate to say there are some good things about COVID, but there are some positives that maybe we can take from it. And that is that what I'm looking forward to this summer as compared to last summer, and usually summer is a rough time in adult education because students have kids at home, or summer's just not a time to go to school, and that's sort of traditional anyway. So our summer attendance is usually much lower than fall and spring anyway. Last summer, we really took a hit because it was 3 months into the pandemic, everything was closed down, it was difficult. But this summer coming up, when everyone is suddenly used to using online learning platforms and things like that, I'm kind of interested to see how many of our students stay engaged over the summer.
Yeah.
Because even if they're not coming into the building, they still can get online, and now they know how to do it. Before it was a brand new thing. So I'm not sure what this summer is going to look like exactly. Like you said, who knows what's going to happen? But I am kind of excited to see going forward if this actually increases our student engagement. I do think anything we can do to keep our students engaged is good. But the fact that we've made it a little easier for them to be in class, they don't have to leave their home necessarily. If they have children at home, they can stay there and still come to class. That has been really useful. Motivation is key in adult ed. You're not mandated to be here usually. And so we really do have to keep our students motivated, but I think making it a little bit easier on some of our students can really help. Michael was talking about some of his student successes. That's something we cheer all about in adult ed, is every time somebody makes a new mark, whether it's a GED or something, lower than that, whatever it may be, we want everybody to cheer and everybody to celebrate. So the classes are great. I had a student back in early December who logged onto my class and said, "Hey, Mr. Ward, I just wanted you to know I'm not coming to class anymore." And I thought, oh, great. He just told all of my students not to come anymore. And it turned out he had passed his last test that day,
Oh,
and he
wow.
got his GED. And
Wow.
so everybody in the class was just like, "Hey, great," and that gave me a chance to tell everybody, "Hey, look, here's an example. You can do this too, even at this crazy time."
Yeah.
A lot of those students had never seen this student because they were virtual.
Yeah.
And so it was a great moment.
That's amazing. And it brings me to a question for Michael, really, because what Curtis is really saying is that there's a silver lining in this cloud, isn't there? I mean, because all of a sudden, there's some things that are changing now as we try to reverse this slide that are going to be permanent, aren't they? They're going to be permanent.
Definitely, there are quite a few silver linings. It's just really working with those and remembering them, and not, once we get back to where there's that in person, not to forget these things that worked
Yeah.
for those students that can't make it to school that day. Or a good example comes to mind of a student that had to leave the country because of visa problems, and then was working his way back here, but he was able to still go into the Zoom meetings, work on his apps from the country he was at, and continue classwork. So these ideas we definitely have to continue to work with and try to use later as well.
Yeah. And finally, Kurt, you've been both on the teaching side, principal side, and also on the technology side. What do you think is on the horizon that you'd like to see, the tech people do? You're an educator.
Yeah, I want to see the tech folks making it easier and easier for kids to access the technology, to make sure that we're linking systems. So often the schools, one of the things we struggle with is we have 5 different products and none of them speak to each other.
Yeah.
And I know there are different things like CIF compliance and other approaches you can use. But having programs interoperable and talk to one another is a big area. And I think making the learning fun, making it engaging, having music really needs to be incorporated. And because, I think somebody mentioned Khan Academy, and although it has its strengths, it puts me to sleep after 15 minutes, And so, there are strengths, but we need engagement for young kiddos in particular. But yeah, that's what I see. And I see the future is going to be blended learning. I think that's what's on the horizon, and we need to prepare for it.
Wonderful. I want to thank all 3 of you, Michael, Curtis, Kurt, for taking time to share these ideas with you. It's fantastic to hear from all of you. Thank you very much. We have a treat for you now. Monica Groves from the XPRIZE Foundation. She's currently project lead for the Rapid Reskilling XPRIZE, and many of you know her from the Adult Literacy XPRIZE. And she's going to give us our keynote to perk us up in the middle of these 2 panels. Let's go, Monica.
Hi, Vinod. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Hope you all are having a great afternoon or morning, wherever you are. So today, I'd like to talk to you about revolution. I know, isn't it exciting? But as we continue to really push through this time of upheaval, hindsight is 2020. And in a way, we're really going through a revolution of our hearts, our minds, and our spirits. And it's a revolution that's really forcing us to reevaluate and question if the way we are accustomed to doing things is really the best way. And a fundamental change is happening, changing the way that we think, the way that we envision our futures, and the way that we see our present, as exemplified by the wonderful panelists who spoke right before me. COVID-19 is hopefully the first and the last global pandemic in our lifetimes, and has really, really pulled the rug of comfort from under some of the feet of people who are privileged in the US, and it has really exposed the woefully inadequate safety nets for some of our most vulnerable members of our communities. Unfortunately, we cannot glean learnings from those who lived through pandemics before us and persevered, but we are in a way flailing, in a sense drowning, and in this case, building the ship while already in the water. And to really ensure that those who cannot swim are able to survive, we must work fast and we must work together. Looking at the holes in the hull of our ship and the incomplete post and starboard, some gaps that need to be filled to bridge our most equitable and bring most equity to those who are vulnerable is really safety nets. That's really important. And learning gaps existed way before the pandemic and are only being exacerbated, as you've heard, due to the disruption of services. And historically, learning has been stunted by a lack of accessibility, a lack of access to information, to know what options are even available, a lack of access to discretionary income to afford classes and programs, even a lack of access to programs geographically. Maybe where they live, there isn't an ABE or ELL program. And to get to the nearest one, it really requires a trek. Sometimes there's access to laptops, smartphones, and tablets, as you heard previously, and lack of access to internet, even transportation and childcare. All of these are results of systemic issues. And there's no coincidence that our most vulnerable are Black, Indigenous, and Latinx people, immigrants, and LGBTQ, and differently abled. We're all rallying for equity in education, economics, and health. Because only when the intersectionality of all systemic issues are realized will we see change. And you can't tackle one issue without tackling the other. It's the equivalent of treating the symptom but not the problem. So historically, if you look back, people who are not in place-based programs, the options to further their learning can be limited, delaying the achievement of GEDs, certifications, degrees, and making the career pathway thick with thorny obstacles. But even as we acknowledge what our learners need, we must also acknowledge what our educators need. Access to information on viable options and alternatives and support is paramount in really bridging those learning gaps and remedying and preventing the COVID slide. A big obstacle is often bureaucracy, be it district, state, or federal. That block or delay with the incorporation of needed blending learning models that include mobile and digital learning into curriculums to meet diverse, varied needs of our learners is really, really important thing to identify and come up with ways to mitigate against that risk. A proactive approach is definitely needed to get blended learning models to become the norm and to really mitigate the learning loss and to consistently deliver quality education anytime, anywhere. So let me tell you what I see. Picture it, United States, 2021. And that's a Sophia Petrillo reference from the Golden Girls. Michelle says, picture it, Sicily. So in the same way that we want to picture this preferred future state, I would love for there to be the equivalent of a Red Cross or FEMA for disasters and emergencies for actual education on a federal level, where a program is rolled out and activated to mitigate for learning loss in the event of another national emergency that causes schools to close down. This in itself is the revolution. It's how we use our collective power to influence legislation and push for philosophical and behavioral change. We always talk about disrupting business and tech, but are we really doing enough to disrupt the education system to properly ensure that our learners are taken care of? And we're all here because we've been called to serve, acutely aware, as Shirley Chisholm would say, that service is the rent that we pay for the privilege of living on this earth. But what do you really need for a successful, long-lasting, impenetrable revolution? So we think about, what are the hallmarks or the features of that? First and foremost, strategy. A strategy that really identifies the preferred future state, what problems or obstacles stand in the way, and also solutions to those problems. So you can move closer to that goal of that equitable learning opportunities for all of our learners. Symbolism. This is just like marketing and branding. This is how you tell your story. A great story is always important to convey your why in a visual way. In these days, people read a little bit less because everything's on their mobile device. And also we're so used to social media that we get little chunks of information. So let's find a way to put the goal out there and get to the finish line with small chunks of visual information through symbolism. So be it colors, logos, a spokesperson, or firsthand accounts from learners or educators, the medium and the message must push your effort forward and really imprint the cause on the minds and hearts of the public. And then there's also coordination, a coordination of efforts on a federal, state, or local level with the same resources and the same metrics. We're often working in silos, not all working in concert to really be able to solve the problem. So as what we're doing today here as a coalition, as a cohort of people who are like-minded and like-hearted and want to work in the same direction, this is a great start of the coordination of those efforts. And then it just comes down to grit, fortitude, and resilience, and really being steadfast in your commitment to meet your goals. And now that you've added fuel to the fire and the plumes of smoke are signaling to your comrades that it's time for change, let's talk about when change comes. It definitely comes when you think outside the box. Everyone here today, before we even got to the point of COVID-19, was already thinking outside the box, but push it further outside the box. You were already incorporating mobile learning, digital learning, other ways to really be able to engage and to retain your students. And you're doing a really great job. You're already creating the coalition of partners that are really going to boost your reach and your effectiveness. And at the end of the day, iterate. You want to iterate to be able to meet learners' needs now, but also anticipate their needs in the future. And as we're already accustomed to digital learning, we're going to really be able to work in ways that we can elevate digital learning to really be able to improve the output of all of our educators and the outcomes of all of our learners. So looking at American poet and the godfather of rap, Gil Scott Heron, he wrote a spoken word piece called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." And as we're working right now through a revolution in our education system, I'd love to recite an excerpt of that and then tell you how this revolution that we are starting right now will not be televised. So, the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts with no commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle or leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Wood and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal, and the revolution will not get rid of the nubs. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner, because the revolution will not be televised. So I tell you, when it comes to the COVID-19 slide, the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the U.S. Department of Education in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show your picture of Biden giving fist bumps to everyone and leading the charge with Monty Wilkinson, General McConville, and Kamala Harris to eat tacos confiscated from a Los Angeles sanctuary city. The revolution will not be televised, and the revolution will not be brought to you by Hallmark's 21 Days of Cheesy Christmas movies, and it will not star Margot Robbie and Leonardo DiCaprio. The revolution will not give your Instagram account 1 million followers, rendering you Influencer of the Year. The revolution will not get rid of TikTok dances, and the revolution will not make you cooler, but it will unify us and make us stronger, because this learning revolution will not be televised. So as you think about it and you reflect, let's say, what is your commitment to stopping the spread of the COVID-19 loss? Are you going to be a monument to times past, or are you going to be a beacon to the movement? Are you moving out of fear instead of ferocity? And are you going to shift the paradigm and work to serve your learners with the coalition of amazing nonprofits, businesses, schools, and edtech entrepreneurs who are here with grassroots influencers to get the work done? So I ask you, are you ready for a revolution? If so, great. But if not, I suggest you get on board, because the ship has finally been completed and the closing ceremony is being presided over by Pro Literacy and Learning Upgrade with you as the crew. This ship has been christened and it's time to set sail. So let's start a learning revolution. Thank you.
All right, Monica. Wow. I wish we could all some applause here, but that was fantastic. And that's exactly what we need right now, as everyone is at home in the grind of COVID. We need to look forward. We need to look to the future, and we need to make it happen and think outside the box. A lot of people giving you kudos in the chat. I wish we could all unmute and talk right now, but thank you so much for lifting us up. We're gonna have to take a clip out of that, out of the video, and start putting it online. All right, thank you very much, Monica. And we're off to our next panel. Our next panel is Richard Capone, Michelle Dietrich, and Prasad Ram. And we're going to be starting this with Richard. Richard Capone is the founder and CEO of Let's Go Learn. Richard.
All right, thank you very much. And that was very motivating, Monica. So I'm excited to be after you, but I'm also a little scared to be following you. So hopefully I won't disappoint. Let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, super. So let's operationalize that revolution that Monica was talking about through the right model. So at Let's Go Learn, we're all about data-driven personalized learning. But what I wanted to share with you today is some things you could walk away with, because my assumption is everyone is at some kind of learning or teaching organization. And I think a lot of times what's tough is bringing about organizational change. What happens is, as we work with a lot of different customers, we notice that a lot of them have very similar challenges, right? And these challenges make it difficult to implement change. And especially now we know it's absolutely necessary. Limited instructional time on task for students. Each student's gaps are so unique, right? This is another thing that's happening because of the COVID slide. You get these gaps emerging, especially in mathematics. The difficulty supporting a diverse classroom or even a small group of students that you're working with, whether it's 5 students, 50 students, or 30 students, or your organization supporting 40,000 students in your school district, right? It's very difficult. Finally, organizational inertia. This is a really big, tough one. How do you rally the troops? How do you get your organization to move past things? My assumption is that you guys are leaders in your organization. So how do you bring about change? And this is one of the things that I've really noticed is a lot of learning and teaching organizations they see instruction as this fixed task. Students' grade level, or it's a certain designated group, English language learners, and we're going to give them instruction. But the problem is that it leads to this piecemeal solution or implementation that happens. And I think what's really important, oops, there you go. How come? Sorry, one of my slides are missing here. All right, sorry about that. One of my slides, how did it happen? It disappeared here. Okay, I apologize. But what I'm going to show you is really the way it works is instruction and assessment is a cycle. All right, and I will go to this one right here. Now, this is obviously a very complicated model here, but if you think about it here, you have assessment, you have instruction, and then it goes through a cycle. A teacher will do that, right? A good teacher will assess, they instruct, they get feedback. And now what happens in a more complicated model is you have different groups of students. You have whole class instruction, you have small group instruction, and you have students with IEPs who may be in this tier 3. So while this is a more complicated model, I think one thing that's really important for everyone to think about is how can I implement this data model into my organization? And it's really about you all saying, okay, we are putting the stake in the ground and we're going to adopt an assessment instruction cycle. So you'd obviously personalize it for yourself. Because we work with a lot of school districts, vary 1 school to 40 schools, they follow a model like this that's very, very complicated, right? But again, I think this is one of the biggest things you could do is to make sure that you have this model and you implement it. Okay, so in terms of best practices for yourself, it's really important, right? So I want to give you some takeaways you can do is operationalize the AI model into your organization. So the very get-go, say, look, this is the model we're following. Make sure you engage all stakeholders. So whether it's the learners, the teachers, if you're working with students, it's going to be parents, right? The other piece here is to use the best technology at the time. So don't just settle for something that's been happening before. Take the step now and move forward. The technology advancement in the past 3 or 4 years has been amazing. COVID has forced the adoption of new technology, and that's another great thing. I think it would have taken 10 years to sort of get to where we are in the past 1 year of acceleration. Of course, there's a lot of students who have not been brought up with that technology adoption. So that's obviously another piece we need to work out. And finally, the next thing is build into your best practices a monitoring, progress monitoring and adjustment cycle, right? So these are some 4 sort of basic best practices that you guys can implement. And it really, like I said, it could be for any organization could implement these 4 things. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to sort of share that with you. Like I said, for ourselves, we work with so many different customers, and I really do feel like it ends up becoming an organizational issue. And that's why we try to really support everyone in implementing these changes.
All right, thanks much, Richard.
Sure.
And up next, we have Michelle Dietrich from Director of Programs from Pro Literacy Worldwide. Michelle, you are on.
All right. Okay, hello everybody. You can see my screen, right, Vinod?
Yes.
Great. Well, hi everybody. Great to be here with you today. Shifting gears a little bit, Pro Literacy New Readers Press are a national organization where they provide support. We provide support to programs across the United States. And so as a national organization that does not provide direct services to students, how can we help programs? We aim to do that by helping service providers gain the tools that they need to help deliver service effectively and efficiently to students. So we talked a lot about the slide, blended learning, hybrid learning. How can Pro Literacy help with those things? Well, what we have is a family of what we are now calling Pro Literacy funds. Many of you may be familiar with the National Book Fund, which provides books and materials to local programs in the form of a grant. Well, we've expanded on that with the focus on digital literacy and digital learning, which is especially more important now, obviously with COVID and distance education. So some of these funds are a mobile learning fund, which provides digital instructional materials to programs in the form of a grant. Another is Write Her Future, which is supported from Lancome, and that is providing Voxy, a product to help English language learners, to women in particular. And then one thing I do want to mention in particular is that we are a proud XPRIZE, Adult Literacy XPRIZE Communities competition winner. And we used those funds to go really start the Mobile Learning Fund so that we could give those materials, those digital materials to local programs. We know that many local programs are really facing a lot of funding challenges right now with COVID as well. So we're aiming to help as much as we possibly can to get those products to them. We actually have a specific fund for Learning Upgrade. We received a $50,000 donation specifically for Learning Upgrade. So I have a link there that you can go and learn more about. I can't get into a lot of details today. We only have a couple minutes, but please, I encourage you to go look for that and apply. And also the Learning Upgrade Challenge. We just started our second year of the Learning Upgrade Challenge, which is engaging programs and students with Learning Upgrade, but doing it in a competition sense so that there are prizes and things for students, instructors, and programs along the way, making it a little bit more fun. One thing we also wanted to do was, of course, Zoom and WhatsApp and these types of platforms are being used by programs to communicate with students and to provide instruction. Well, how can Pro Literacy help? We help by, we worked out a partnership with Zoom in which we were able to provide Zoom licenses to programs at half price. So far, we've given away 500 licenses to local programs that are using those. There's a link there as well if you'd like to get more information about that. Next, we're really, all of these things can't be done without some professional development. So one thing that Pro Literacy has done has offered a number of webinars. We have a Learn and Share series. New Readers Press obviously provides webinars. And we also have a partnership with World Education and the EdTech Center for providing distance education strategies and solutions. So we're at the point where we're offering a webinar at least once a week on various strategies to help local programs and help them get the PD that they need to be able to engage students and stop with some of the slide. So our idea is really, we know that local programs are taxed with time, with resources, with tools, and we're hoping that some of these tools can help them financially. And one last thing I wanted to mention was, because of slide, we want to talk about student persistence. And obviously student persistence has a whole new meaning when we talk through COVID and distance learning. But Pro Literacy Education Network, which is our professional development portal, has just released a series of new courses, Adult Student Persistence. So you can see the courses listed there. I'd encourage you to go to proliteracyednet.org and look at those courses to help with some of those student persistence issues during a time of COVID slide. And hopefully that will help you out. And that's all I have.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Pro Literacy has been working with us for many years now, and it's pretty amazing what's happening just in the last few years, that so many programs that are tiny and can't afford things like instructional technology can now apply for grants and get it. So that's fantastic. Next up, we have Prasad Ram from Guru. And Guru creates a program called Navigator that's used around the world as a platform for learning. So Prem, take it away.
Terrific. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Prasad Ram. As Vinod just mentioned, Guru is a nonprofit for education, research, and technology. And we develop, think of it as the Google Maps for learning, called the Guru Navigator. So basically, think about it. You cannot get a learner to any destination to where you want them to go without knowing where they are to start with. And this is the fundamental challenge that all of education has, particularly in the context of COVID. People have all kinds of other gaps, and if we don't know where exactly they are, then we can't get them to where they need to go. And once you have an understanding of where they are and where they need to go, then you can come up with a pathway. There are plenty of resources, open resources available as well. So what Guru has done is to develop a Guru Navigator. It's a GPS for learning that kind of addresses every learner. When we talked about equity and so forth, it's very important to know that it is equity by design. Every learner, no matter who they are, has a current levels of proficiency in different subjects and certain preferences, and we can come up with a route that takes them to their destination and reroute them based on their performance. The orange thing there indicates the reroute based on their performance to kind of make sure that they get to their destination. And I'll just kind of very quickly mention this, that we kind of capture how the current, what we call as the location of the learner, is this thick white line, which we call as the skyline. It's the set of competencies this learner has mastery on. And the thick green line, we call that the high line, that's their destination. So if you think of your experience with Google Maps, your starting point is a latitude and longitude, your ending point is a latitude and longitude, and there's a route that gets computed. So in a very similar way, we kind of look at your skyline. Every learner has a skyline, every learner has a high line, and the gaps between the two is what we need to cover. So what Guru has done is to develop the Guru Navigator, and what we have seen based on research is students are gaining 2.8 years of growth per year. And this in a network of high schools where students on the average are 5 grade levels behind in math in 9th grade. So we have, and this primarily because, the teacher and the student all have complete transparency about where every student is and how they are journeying. So, and teachers have gained productivity, as well as we provide tools for education leaders in the schools to kind of completely monitor and scale success. So what we have done in the past year, or almost a year, is we have made 5 big improvements to address the COVID slide. So I'll just mention that Guru Navigator is a free tool that people can go and begin to download. So first, we kind of initially started as a tool that we worked with school districts to implement, but then because of the COVID loss, we implemented a free tool for the students so that they can go download it on their mobile app and begin to navigate to their learning destinations. We similarly built a tool for the parents called the Navigator for Guardians, where parents can monitor for all their children how each of them are progressing, or where the gaps are, and so on and so forth, and what is the kind of activities that they're engaged in, and so on. Then similarly, we kind of enabled students to join classrooms, synchronous classrooms, over a video conference. So previously, we had assumed that the students would be physically in the class, and we had a whole bunch of tools where teachers can monitor where the students are in what we call as an air traffic control view. Can I kind of understand where every quote unquote a student of mine is in terms of progress and performance? and kind of get real-time data and personalize the intervention for every learner. But now we enable the students to join the classroom over video conference using Zoom or Google Meet and so forth. And one of the biggest issues came up, which was the school leadership, like principals and curriculum coordinators and superintendents, didn't have access to information in real time. So we developed a tool called Mission Control that provides real-time data to all stakeholders in the school system so that they can monitor the progress and scale success. And finally, we kind of developed a community portal where all the educators or all the school leadership, curriculum coordinators or superintendents, they can go participate in the community portal and kind of support each other. So this way we are, not just enabling them with a bunch of tools, but enabling them to interact amongst themselves, share their experiences, and support each other. So what Guru has provided is a set of tools. Unlike in Google Maps, only has the student or the learner user version of it corresponding to the learners here. But we have tools for instructors, school leadership, Guardian, which is the parent app, content providers, administrators, researchers, and tool developers, so that all of them get real-time data, actionable real-time insights, so that they can coordinate their support of the learner. So this what we have done. I'll be sharing this presentation with you, but there are videos in this slide about all the links. And the model in which we, as a nonprofit, we scale sustainably is the tools are free when students and parents and teachers use it. But when a school district adopts, they pay $1 per student per year, per active student per year, not rostered students. And that covers the operating costs for Guru. So with that, I will encourage all of you to go to guru.org and download the app today and start reversing the COVID slide this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prem. And let's bring our three panelists back. And we've been getting some nice questions. And so Richard, Prem, and Michelle. First of all, Richard, something that Kurt had mentioned in the previous panel really caught my attention, which is to solve the COVID slide, every student has to have personalized assessment and instruction, similar to a special ed students get now. For those of you familiar with an IEP, it's now every student has to have an IEP, right? Every student is special ed. Let's Go Learn has really done some amazing work in special ed. So talk about how we can take all that jewels of knowledge
Sure.
and now it's everyone.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I think part of the difficulty is in special education, it's an assumption that when you do a diagnostic assessment, it's a true diagnostic. We're not just saying, oh, the student is low in math, they're low in measurements, they're low in number strands. It's about finding out what is their zone of proximal development. So, and a teacher would do this naturally, right? You evaluate a student, but nowadays technology could do it, and that's what we really focus on. Like for instance, in math, we actually look at 44 subtests across mathematics, and within each one is a scope and sequence of skills and concepts, and we find those points. And that's how you can accelerate and close those gaps quickly. In the past, it was only students with the individual education program that you could do this for, but now technology is allowing you to leverage that to say, look, here's an 8th grader, we're going to examine their abilities K-12 and find exactly their zone of proximal development, come up with an individual education program, and then we execute on that. It's a combination. I think people realizing that it is possible with technology, and also understanding a lot more about data. The problem is a lot of people think about placement tests or quick tests as being able to be diagnostic, but it's really, if the test takes 10 minutes, it's going to give you loose data. If the test takes, an hour, it's going to give you better data in general. I mean, there's obviously some efficiencies with adaptive logic, but I think part of my recommendation to organizations is make sure your people learn about assessment, make sure they learn about instruction, make sure everyone has the right vocabulary. What does it mean diagnostic? What does it mean, what's an IEP, what does it mean, all these different things. And it's an important thing to do to elevate that, that fluency of words and how we talk and think internally in an organization.
Yeah. Michelle, one of the more amazing things that I've seen in terms of during COVID has been the challenge that you guys put on. Somehow made a competition and fun out of getting students to do, a lot of work remotely, including tech work. You have prizes for the program that has the most hours and for the teacher or instructor that has the most student hours, and then prizes for the students. I saw some data from some of the students from East Baton Rouge lately that just blew my mind, where one student had done 15 courses in 3 months and made some huge gains. So talk about making a game out of this to motivate all levels.
To motivate all levels of students?
No, I mean students, instructors, programs, everyone.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's funny. We talked a little bit about the silver lining during a couple presentations. And one of the things I think is interesting is, these digital tools, of course, now the programs are forced to use them, essentially. They're learning to use the technology. They're learning to embrace it. They're now seeing, like we said, blended learning is here to stay. We are going to do this in some way, shape, or form going forward. But one of the silver linings is that instructors were really forced to learn about technology as well. Some of the students were showing some of the instructors how to use different apps and technologies. And I think that gives the students motivation and keeps them engaged. So I know it's not answering your exact question, but I think that there is that benefit to all people engaged. And so that the instructors are learning from the students are learning from the instructors. There are different ways of engaging, even just using some of these tools to keep in contact with each other is a big thing for keeping that persistence going and preventing that slide. So I guess that's I would put that under the category of silver lining, in that programs have been forced to move to new technologies. They've been forced to think differently. They've been forced to provide instruction differently. And so they're changing their models and they're finding ways to engage students differently. And some students who previously weren't engaged are now a little bit more engaged because of the technology, or knowing that they can do certain things from home where they weren't able to before. So it's good to see that it's able to. It is a hindrance, of course. COVID has definitely caused a slide. It has caused some students to drop out of programs, but there's also that silver lining in that it has caused students to learn differently as well. So
yeah, exactly. And one of the when Drew and I were working on the graph that everyone saw at the beginning, one of the things that really jumped out at me was that at the end of COVID, if we do the same thing we used to do, students are going to be on a parallel line, always behind. They're sort of permanently behind. And we're going to have this giant group of millions of children and adults that are permanently behind. One of the things that Pram said that strikes me so much is that they actually have data showing in math 2.8 years growth per year. And that's similar to some things we had happen during the XPRIZE field test. Prem, if you can talk about how, instructors can use something like Navigator, and that accelerated learning can become, something that can move someone back to grade level.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll just mention that in the diagram that you showed where students fall behind, you are discounting the challenge of compounding. Since when you fall behind, you fall further and further behind over time. You don't stay the same way, right? Because the class keeps moving forward, or the curriculum keeps moving forward. So the result is even worse than what you anticipate. And the comment about 2.8 years, I'll just take your experience with Google Maps. Since yes, Google Maps gets you to the airport, but you still have to have your car, you still have to put gasoline, you still have to drive, you still have to do everything yourself, right? So, and when we say we get 2.8 years, the student and the teacher actually get 2.8 years. We are just the spell checker. The teacher is the poet, and the poem is getting created. We can't take credit while we kind of show the data that way. The reality is the teacher, when she's equipped with real-time data and suggestions from the system as to how to intervene for individual students, then she can monitor. So like we kind of think of it like an air traffic controller. If you can understand where all your planes are flying, then you can give instructions. You go 10 miles per hour faster, you veer 10 degrees east, and so on and so forth. So this is what the teacher does, is kind of she has real-time data about how every student is progressing and suggestions from the system, which she can use or she may override, which is perfectly fine. So that allows her to kind of personalize the intervention. And what we are seeing is student also takes more agency now that they can see their skyline keep getting bumped up. So it's like when you're driving on a long tour, a long road trip, the fact that you are, just 200 miles short of your destination kind of motivates you to kind of make the push. And that's kind of what we see happening consistently here as well.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Hey, Vinod, I had a comment on that gap, especially in mathematics, around 2008, when the Common Core sort of new standards in schools were implemented, which sort of upped, not all states adopted it, right, of course, but they all did adopt a modern interpretation of mathematics. You see now that gaps start developing around third grade. And what Mr. Ram just mentioned was in terms of the compounding. We see people falling behind starting in third grade, really. And then by the time they're in high school, they're many years behind. So this is not something new. This need for data-driven personalized learning existed 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's just that now it's even worse, right? So it brings us up that we need revolution, we need change, we need to change how we do this, and it's for equity, right? If we don't do this, then we will never have equity.
Yeah, the gaps are just going to get bigger. One final thing for Michelle before we close here. Is you work with a lot of very small kind of organizations, like little libraries, literacy centers, homeless shelters, you name it. How do you think them kind of having to step up, big districts and colleges have got, Zoom and learning management systems, all the rest. But how do you see this COVID experience changing these little organizations?
Good question. They are getting very creative with how they are connecting with students. We'd heard about programs that were driving to a local business and parking in the parking lot and using their internet to connect with their students. So they are getting really creative, and it does bring to mind one other thing, and it also relates to some of Monica's comments, which Pro Literacy is an advocacy body. We advocate on behalf of adult educators. And so one of the things that we really need to do, in addition to providing digital tools and professional development, is advocate for connectivity. It is absolutely essential. One of the, I guess, what you call a silver lining is that it brought to light how many people are without connection. And that is just absolutely unacceptable. So Pro Literacy will continue to advocate. There was some COVID legislation passed at the end of December that is pushing in that direction. There could be potentially grants for low-income families to receive internet. But I guess I just say that they've been creative. We've been trying to push programs to understand a little bit more about how they can connect with students and where they can find internet and how they can even use tools without that. We've even had some programs that have hand-delivered packets or videos to students. So those little programs, they're struggling, but they are definitely getting more and more creative.
That's great. I want to thank Richard, Michelle, Pram for joining us today and all your insight. Yeah, it's just fascinating to hear from you. Drew and I are going to wrap up. Drew, you have some things to share from today that you've in real time put together. So what would you say are the big takeaways today?
I mean, the list could go on forever. I tried to do my best to put together a quick list, but number one that was the theme was just supporting our teachers. That's something that I think Kurt really hit. Michael brought it up, but we need to make sure that, at the federal and the state level, Monica was talking about how we need a federal crisis program to really provide the tools, training, and importantly, funding. We're asking teachers to do it all. We're asking them to be superheroes right now, and they really need the support so that they can do that. Solutions need to be equitable. And so, the solutions can't just be for the students who already have smartphones, who already have connectivity at home. If our solution that we're presenting is hardware, software, and connectivity, then that needs to be equitable for everybody. Once you do that, we can leverage that technology, the apps, the LMS, and the platforms. It's an equitable solution that now, we can, deploy on a national level. By doing that, it has to be data-driven. That's something that both Pram and Richard really hit on, is that, this cycle of instruction and assessment needs to be data-driven. And that way we can, make progress by monitoring and then making adjustments. One of the big ones, that ties into the top of the tools, training, and funding. That's what pro-literacy does. Pro-literacy is here for these organizations that really need, a national organizing body to support them. So if you're not a pro-literacy member, make sure you, look and see if you can become a member there and really look into the tools that they have, the professional development, the mobile learning fund, the challenge. And, that's just what we're covering today. Pro-literacy does a whole lot. So if you're not familiar with the organization, make sure to go to their website and learn more. The admins and the directors, again, data in real time, the data is important. That's how we're going to accelerate and close the gaps. And the final takeaway is, COVID has been a very trying and challenging time at schools for all of us. But, the silver linings are there. And so one is that blended learning is here to stay. New tools have been adopted and new skills have been learned for the teachers, the admins, and the students. And that's something that we can, use to accelerate that intervention as we move forward. And so we will be sharing contact slides, things like that from all of our presenters today. These are just the takeaways I was able to grab while listening. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. It really was an amazing day. I want to thank everyone for coming. We're going to upcoming webinar in about a month. You'll be getting info on it. 5 ways to reverse the COVID slide. We want this to be a continuing learning exercise and all of us to contribute. And for all of you coming, these are the URLs of all the organizations: Learning Upgrade, Pro-Literacy, Let's Go Learn, Guru, XPRIZE, Chicago Citywide Literacy.org. Get involved. Let's all share ideas. Let's figure this out. We're making a recording of this. Pro-Literacy is going to share the recording with everyone who signed up for this webinar. So you will be getting a recording link, share it with everyone, and let's get people talking some more. Thank you very much for joining, and please keep in touch with all of us. Thank you.